So, this is my first video entry. I'm gonna just kind of go by my gamer tag, which is the Black Dog 1016, Black Dog 1016. You can catch me on PS5. But I kind of wanted to just make this series basically to just talk about certain sides of existentialism. Growing up, I always had a desire to search for meaning in life, and that came in many different forms. So I've always tended to think in abstract about a lot of different things. Maybe because one, I was not truly happy with how the way life was presented. Two, things of the mundane and self-preservation and survival weren't things that necessarily truthfully fulfilled me. Three, maybe I never truly went through those things to begin with, so I never was truthfully engaged in the world. But I went through a lot of things which wound up getting me diagnosed with PTSD. But through my way of abstract thinking, I started to come across, I guess, weird understandings of how the way ancient people, I would say, lived or understood or viewed the world. I've had few mental breaks where certain things started to make complete sense. So a lot of things that we necessarily look at about the world is, in a sense, kind of not how it is. And modern science is starting to see that with the whole concept of light and how, light is produced from inside our eyes, and we just pick up on multiple different signals of the outside world. So in a sense, we never see reality for what it is, but we see reality based on what our perception is. And our perception is shaped by basically the aspect of time or various different experiences that has happened that necessarily molds us into who we are. But ultimately, what those experiences mean, ultimately based on what emotion or thought process you can use to actually find meaning in it. So a lot of people who base their lives around the concept of fear or avoiding the unknown or things that can potentially make them feel threatened, they will base their whole lives basically future oriented and trying to predict everything that would necessarily happen. A lot of people who experience the whole concept of thrill and things like that, or a lot of people who come from a traumatic environment, they're so used to necessarily only focus on getting their base needs met that a lot of them become somewhat spontaneous and explosive in certain environments when they're able to finally activate or express who they are or the things that they hold within them. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the whole world is just basically, in a sense, symbols and things like that we interpret it and we give those things meaning. So in a sense, in a very nihilistic sense, the world is meaningless and we are the force that actually gives the world meaning itself. Now, a nihilist would necessarily say that, you should do as thy willed or do as what you want, engage in hedonism or other kind of forms of behavior. Now, don't get me wrong, those things are very, very fun. And a lot of those things are necessary for human evolution as well. Because if you look from a grander scheme of things, your whole existence is predicated upon an aspect that you have no control over. So the whole aspect of nihilism, or there's no grand meaning in life, that can only be from the rejection of your own biological or bodily impulses. So in a sense, no one truly believes that, period. Everybody just adopts a certain framework or reject a framework that was presented to them at birth. So in a sense, everything that we necessarily do, or how the way we view ourselves or how the way we interact with the world, is all based on experience, positive and negative, and they're all reinforced by our perception of what that experience is. So a lot of people live their life never truly feeling their emotions, period. Which means that they never see what they truly want in life, period. Because they can't go through the whole hard aspects. They just look at what something they would think would make them happy, but then that could be based off of a whole lot of trauma and a whole lot of fear-based responses from their upbringing that their parents put on them. Now, I'm not saying structure should not be there, but what I'm trying to say is that this planet is literally ran on things that are no longer existing, that have left their imprint, that we as human beings and as a species keep bringing forth when it might not be necessary for this time. So we kind of disassociate, we kind of don't get around the real environment. We all get online and we do things like that, and we craft this gigantic environment that we believe is actual reality, when in turn it's not at all. It's just based on a perception, based on 100 people who kind of agree with each other and network throughout the same algorithm, which that algorithm uses mathematical data based on probability and observation of all of basically all of the user's data and all of the input that is from human experience from the time that we have computers. So in a sense, we're programs living in a program, relying on programs, and then saying that there's no meaning in the world, when everything that was programmed has a purpose, so that is the meaning within itself. But if the concept of nihilism that I said earlier was, people truthfully believe that, whether they do or don't, you can kind of use that philosophy within itself to find meaning and purpose in life by giving yourself the thing that gives the world meaning and purpose, which I believe that is one thing that I believe biblical scripture has stated. I don't know which one, but I believe God told Adam, go out into the earth, be fruitful, multiply, go out and name things. When you name things, you give things a sense of meaning, you give things a sense of power, and you also take their power away by understanding of what it is. But in order to name something, you must first observe, watch, and learn everything it is to associate its behavior with what sound, frequency, or emotion that thing gives in context with what its purpose is. So in a sense, in order to name things, in order to think about things like that, we have to actually develop language, because we have to be able to share exact and precise thoughts with one another to do so. So in a sense, we had to create all of these things in order to come across the concept of purpose itself. And then now we're at a sense where we are the animal that, if the world is godless and meaningless, we are the animal that has the capabilities of peering into the unseen to understand that there's a grander picture at large. The only way we can truly activate on whatever purpose that we necessarily might have would be to trial and error of the things that we would necessarily want and our desires first and foremost. But you have to also remember, your desires can also just be a coping mechanism from something that you truthfully are from a long time ago. Like, one thing that I've kind of realized is that a lot of people let me go back. Something else that I've looked at in nature is that we consume food, and all of the food that we consume gives us certain nutrients, gives us certain vitamins, gives us certain things that contribute to the inner world that is us, that we feel that on the outside world, and it's then expressed on our skin, muscle, things like that. So every little thing that we necessarily eat has a distinct virtue or a distinct meaning that gives that thing its sense of power. We then consume that thing's absorbed by us. So if you can constantly look at the entire world as we eat things to gain necessarily power or to gain their virtues, those things are composed of multiple different little things that are interconnected. The whole thing is like a hologram that we're in. So if you look at that thing, or that little whole thought process or line, all the way up to you as a human being or a species, then you can kind of say that necessarily there are things above us that we do not have senses of understanding. So if there are things that are above us that we don't have senses of understanding, we are the virtue that thing needs. So maybe through the whole concept of all is one, where you can look at that through the physical sense of all energy comes from the same source, everything is the same sense of matter expressed in different ways, everything has a chain, everything is basically a cause and effect towards each other. And you can also look at it from the aspect of we all have the ability to mate with each other. So in a sense, this world is just a gigantic world that is truthfully not separate from one another, but everything is just different variations and expressions on different playing fields of awareness. So then you start necessarily thinking like we have different forms of things that exist that we can't truthfully explain. Like, we would think of things like, where does the wind come from? And not to say some type of mystical force or anything like that, but who is to say that who isn't to say that we don't have the sense to actually perceive what wind is, and therefore we can't say that that could be something else that is of higher thing. Now, it's not to push the whole theory of animism and there are just all of these necessarily spirits, but one thing I've always personally believed is that all of these things are one and the same, meaning that the spiritual side of things is not 100% complete, and the physical or scientific side of things are not 100% complete. But when you really look at the world, you can literally see what things are right then and there. But the thing is, our perception becomes so limited that we don't understand the big picture of what things are, so we don't know our place in it. So when we don't know our place, then we basically focused on survival and what our attachments are of whatever our body is, or we're focused on trying to find our purpose in the absolute extreme that we don't just be to exist, to actually find out what that virtue is. So if there are things that exist over top of us, or there are things that exist within us, or there are higher forces that are at play, you can kind of say that we are the virtue that give those things necessarily power. But we having the sense of self-awareness, we can change whatever that thing is, but it has to be in a sense from a collective perception. But that's the thing with humanity, is that it's very hard to get them to agree on anything, because they're literally the same thing having a different experience. So every last one of them will literally sit there and fight each other to the death, and it's all because of the same fear-based feeling or thought pattern that they were born into. So in a sense, it's like everybody's just being controlled by their environment, even when they have the ability to change their environment now. So in a sense, it's always the past being expressed throughout the present through all of our actions and everything like that. Human beings are very, very, very weird. So throughout this series, one thing that I want to necessarily make is that I want to be able to, I guess, express all of these abstract thoughts so I can kind of get them out of my head. So it's like I'll stop, I guess, in a sense, going crazy when I see the same things that I've always necessarily thought being posted. So it's going to be more like a document. It's going to be more like a diary, or more like a documentary series of explaining all of these things. So this was my first video. The first thing is going to be called Artificiality. So thank you.